They think they wouldn't find that?
Right.
Like,
And so this is the best moment. He walks over. Again, I'm sitting right there. He's like 3 feet from me. The prosecutor walks over, hands the book to Mesro and says, "Thank you. That was very helpful."
Please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show.
But for example, 2017, I got to break the story that Danny Masterson was being investigated by the LAPD.
yeah, I really want to litigate this case today and go through this because I was watching this like in the background for a while. It got like retried and stuff, and
I was in court for both trials every day. I was just 15 feet away from Bijou and the rest of the family.
Yeah.
And got to see him led away in handcuffs when he was convicted after the second trial. So
how did you break the story? What happened there?
I found out that multiple women had complained about him, but what really made it a fascinating story was that the LAPD was having problems with the investigation. So if you look at the very first story I wrote in March 2017, it's all there. I've got copies of the police reports. I've got excerpts from a letter one of the Jane Does had written the chief of police complaining.
What year?
This was March 2017.
Yeah, but what year had she written approximately?
Oh, the letter was only maybe a couple weeks old when that I excerpted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So right then.
I mean, it was a crisis moment. They had come to these incidents happened way back in 2002 and 2003. Right. But they had reopened this whole thing, and when the women went to them in 2016, and by early 2017, I was hearing about this and that they were really panicked because the LAPD was doing some very strange things with this investigation, things that came out later in a trial, some really strange missteps that the LAPD was doing. And these women thought, Scientology's messing this all up, or the LAPD is. And
cut them in the pocket.
And so that's what my initial story was, is that, is the LAPD, messing up this investigation? So that was a big story because then the LAPD did admit that they were looking into Danny Masterson. All the press covered it. But then I covered it, that story virtually every day from 2017 until he was convicted last May. So it's been a big part of my life. And what I always tell people is the real story is what these women have been through. They have been through so much harassment and so much, again, the LAPD was messing it up at some points. I know it looked like the prosecutors were kind of holding back.
Prosecutors were
it took so long. That story came out in March 2017. The prosecutors did not charge Danny Masterson until June 2020. So for 3 years, these women were waiting for some kind of a case to emerge.
Do you think some of that had to do with, I'm just playing a little devil's advocate here, had to do with the fact that the cases were like 14, 15 years old when they were first reported?
It's always going to be a tough case. When time has passed, when you've got a celebrity involved, all these things made it a difficult case.
That's right.
But you put the Scientology element in it, and that's what really makes it difficult. And
why for this?
Well, these prosecutors knew that it was going to be, what they wanted to convince the jury of was that the reason these women had not come forward earlier was they were worried about retaliation from Scientology. So you have to explain to the jury why that is, the fact that Danny's a protected celebrity. And that's why I was there, Julian, honestly, is that I wanted to see how much Scientology was a part of this case. And it was a very big part of it.
Like, as in obvious to the idea even that you see dudes sitting in the courtroom who are maybe hired thugs of Scientology?
Not just people in the gallery. The attorneys on Danny's side were doing bizarre things that only made sense if they were taking directions directly from David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology. Okay, so before there was a trial, there was something called a preliminary hearing. In a preliminary hearing, you have just the victims testify. You don't have all the witnesses testify, but you just have the women. This is the first time they testified on the witness stand.
And they're Jane Does, right?
The 3 Jane Does.
Yeah.
And this first time they got to testify was in this preliminary hearing. At that point, Danny Masterson's attorney was Tom Mesereau. If you remember Tom
Yes,
Mesereau, who
yes.
defended
Can you pull him up, Alessi?
Michael
He's
Jackson and
big time guy.
And he's the one with the famous hairdo.
Great hair.
Yes.
He does have great hair.
And I was sitting just right behind him in the courtroom. This was like kind of during the pandemic, so that like there weren't very many seats. You had to sit far apart. I was sitting right behind him. And they had questioned, I can't remember, it was Jane Doe 3 was on the stand. And the attorney for Scientology leaned over you know how there's a little barrier there between the gallery seats and where the attorneys sit right. She leans over it and she's saying to him, "It's not in there. It's not in there." And see, I'm not trying to hear them, but I can't help it. They're like 3 feet from me. What she's pointing at is this Scientology book. So then Mesereau gets up and he goes up to Jane Doe and he says, "You keep saying that you weren't allowed to report Danny Masterson and that's why it took you so long. And you keep saying that it's in Scientology's rules that you can't go to the police. I have the ethics book here. I'm going to ask you to look through a chapter and you tell me if you can find anything in there about not going to the police."
Was this like something written by like L. Ron Hubbard?
Yes.
Oh my God.
This is in the preliminary hearing. Okay, so we take a break. We come back, and he says, "Okay, so did you look through the book?" "Yes, I did." "Did you find anything in that chapter about not, that you can't go to the police?" And she says, "No, I couldn't." "Thank you, Your Honor." Right, like the big Perry Mason moment.
He's strutting off.
And it's very clear to me that he did that because David Miscavige had told the attorney to tell him to do that. Okay, so then the prosecutor comes up. It's his turn. He says, "Mr. Mesereau, can I borrow that book, please?" And so he takes the book and he shows her a different chapter, and it's right there in black and white. Scientologists cannot report to civil authorities. Isn't that what that says there? Yes, it is.
They think they wouldn't find that?
Right. And so this is the best moment. He walks over. Again, I'm sitting right there. He's like 3 feet from me. The prosecutor walks over, hands the book to Mesereau and says, "Thank you. That was very helpful."
That's incredible.
And that was the moment I wrote about this. This was 2021. I was like, I just witnessed David Miscavige and Scientology completely screw up Danny Masterson's defense live in front of me. That's how involved Scientology was in this. There was a huge blunder, and it kept costing them because anytime after that, when Mesereau or his successor, this guy Philip Cohen, would argue to the judge to keep stuff out of Scientology out, she would always remind them, you guys brought Scientology into this case to begin with. That blunder cost them over and over and over again.
And that was the one you're mentioning is from 2021. So that's the first trial, right?
That was the preliminary hearing.
Oh, that's right.
So that was the 3 women testified, and the judge then decided there is enough evidence to have a trial. That's the point of the preliminary hearing.
Now,
these women ended up testifying 3 separate times in the preliminary hearing, the trial that had a hung jury, and then the trial that convicted him.
So that's amazing that they did this and
they
put
went
themselves
through
through
so
that
much
ordeal.
torture. That's what I want people to understand, how much an ordeal these women went through over so many years.
I'm always careful about this because I don't have the articles in front of me. I don't want to mess anything up because obviously you saw them and were part of this case, but without revealing who they might have been or something like that, was there a similar story with all of them as far as their background and how they came into contact with Danny and how he behaved around them to get to that point where he committed this act?
All 3 of them were Scientologists at the time of the attacks.
Oh boy.
Jane Doe 3 had been his girlfriend and they'd been living together. Jane Doe 1 was just part of their social group, and you saw him at parties. And Jane Doe 2 was a Scientologist actress that had gotten to know Danny, and he asked her over to his house one time. But also, 2 other women testified. The actress Trisha Vesey, a well-known actress of independent film, she testified that she was attacked by Masterson way back in '96.
Oh, so she testified on the record?
She testified in the first trial. And a woman named Kathleen Jenkins testified in the second trial that she was attacked in Toronto at a party when he was there. There's also another woman who is part of the civil suit, Babette Realis, who alleges that she was attacked by Danny, but she was not part of the criminal trial. So that's 6. But have been references to other victims in the court papers.
Right. So the three Jane Does are the ones that were the actual charges. But
They
these
were the
other people
charge
provided corroborating.
Exactly.
Got it. Whoa.
And then in the first trial, the jury hung on all 3. In the second trial, he got 2 convictions and 1 hung jury. And a really important element of this, I know it gets confusing, but you could not in California and most other places bring a charge of forcible rape against a person 20 years after the incident. But in California, there's this law where you can bring multiple charges.
Oh, wow.
It's called the one strike law. And under that, if he gets 2 or more convictions, they carry potential life sentences. And that's why the prosecutor was very clear about this in the preliminary hearings and stuff. He was saying when there's a potential life sentence involved, there's no statute of limitations. Scientology, well, I shouldn't say Scientology. His defense attorneys fought this over and over and over again, but they kept losing because, under that law. So we knew going in, when we finally found out that they had a verdict, I remember we were standing in the hallway. I was like 3 feet from Danny, and they all seemed buoyant. They thought it was going to be a hung jury. I thought it was going to be a hung jury too.
In 2023.
The May 2023, the second trial. We heard there was a verdict, and we were all standing in the hallway after a lunch break. It was just really crowded. I'm right there by Danny, by Bijou, by Danny's mom, his brothers, right there.
Did you ever talk with them?
The brothers a little bit, but I didn't. I was conscious of not wanting to get kicked out of there. I knew if I said anything to them, they would probably ask the judge to kick me out because they really didn't like me. So I would get some funny looks from Bijou, but I never really.
They didn't like you?
I didn't really spoke to him.
No way.
Yeah. So we went in there, and I think most of us knew that if he gets 2 convictions, he's going to prison. 1 conviction is not enough. Because under the law, they were, you see, under the law, they were
after the fact too.
It's the law, under the law they were charging him with, it was the word multiple. Now 3 would mean even more time, but you need 2. And so the clerk read out the first guilty and then read out, as soon as the clerk read out the second guilty, we heard this otherworldly wail. I can't do it. It's just like this horrendous sound because Bijou knew when it was 2, he's going to prison. And right after the second one was announced, she just wailed. And the judge said, listen, you're going to have to compose yourself or you're going to have to leave. And she was crying. She was being more quiet at that point. But see, she knew, we all knew, you needed 2, and they had the 2. So in the second trial, he was convicted on 2, hung on the third. It was close on the third.
Was that the girlfriend?
Yeah. I mean, it's always tougher with that one.
Tough.
And yeah, exactly. And look, she did great on the stand, both trials. So you really can't blame her. It's just, and we don't know what the jury.
Yeah, I don't blame. It's a tough thing to convince a jury of 12. I was living with a guy, and
right.
That's difficult. But why do you think they were in the 2021 trial? Why 2022, the one before it? Why do you think they came back hung on all 3?
I think that the prosecution could have done a better job. Philip Cohen, the defense attorney, did a really good job in that first trial, confusing things and raising some issues. And so the second time around, they were ready for it a little bit better. And I think one big decision they made that paid off huge was that the prosecutors were 2 deputy district attorneys named Reinhold Mueller and Ariel Anson. And Mueller handled virtually everything in the first trial. When they came back for the second trial, Ariel Anson was much more involved in the opening statements, in the interviews of the witnesses, but then the closing arguments. She was incredible. She was just absolutely amazing.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.